When I was first researching about posing, I looked and I saw two real different fields. The first one said that keeping your subject still, keeping them calm, keeping them in one position was the way to go, while the other one talked more about movement and prompting and emotional interactions with one another. I got super confused, and I don't know if you guys are too, but what was I supposed to know when to do each? Well, it turned out I was asking the wrong question. Really, what it comes down to is, what are you trying to emit from your photographs? What emotion do you want to get from your clients? Static versus dynamic posing are two completely different ones. Static says that as soon as you're still, you're able to force somebody into that position. Whereas if you're moving, you're going to get those genuine, authentic, candid moments. For me, neither of them really worked. I wanted to have the static combined with the dynamic, and I'm going to kind of walk you guys through what that is. So static poses tend to convey trust, calm, and a sense of confidence for your viewer. Emotions of comfort and stability are essential, and especially in the relationships that we're trying to capture. Whether they're romantic or familial, having this kind of posing can make those traditional classic looks of your photographs. It's not really what I'm going for though, is it? And if you're here, chances are you're not going for that either. For the purpose of this posing guide, we're going to utilize static poses to start off our clientele in the actual positioning that we want. We're going to start them there so that we can get a sense for what angles look best on them, which areas we want to focus on. How many of you guys have been out on a shoot before and you look at someone and they say, "Can you make my arm thinner?" There's ways to do that with static posing, but also to get those interactions that we're looking for. Consider this situation. You and your significant other or family are super private people. Touching or hugging outside of the home isn't something you do often, but you want photographs that make private, intimate parts of your relationship part of those photographs. As a photographer, how are you going to capture those feelings? Really, the key takeaway from this segment is the sooner we can get our clients to trust us, the faster they're going to open up and the more authentic and genuine those photographs are going to be. You can see that they essentially giggle uncomfortably and even try to break away from the pose to ease the tension. I immediately send them back into that position, forcing them to lean into the discomfort. This is the way that I build my clients' trust in my ability when I first show up for a shoot. I joke with them and I make sure they're smiling, but I also overkill 2 or 3 static poses on purpose. Humans are naturally inclined to a flight or fight response. So the second that they get uncomfortable in front of the camera, that breakaway or that disengagement of being actually involved with their partner or involved in what we're asking them to do, it happens almost immediately. By forcing them back into it. And what I mean by forcing is not get back there, sit back down, don't you dare move again. No, absolutely not. But joke around with them and say, "What, you don't want to snuggle some more?" Or, just kind of strike along the side of your ear a little bit more, play with the back of your hair. You can get them back into that position, and keeping them longer than you actually think you should is going to help them to actually build trust with you. I have found that if I start this at the beginning of a session, by the end, my clients are doing all the work for me. They go through and they actually interact with one another. I'll get them into a shot. They start moving themselves. They start to actually kiss on their own. They start to nibble on each other's ears alone. I'm just kidding. They don't nibble, but you know what I mean. Dynamic poses are ones that incorporate movement, interactions. They're supposed to be real. They're supposed to be those forced, candid moments. We want somebody to feel like we've just stepped into the moment with them. It's not supposed to be where, oh my gosh, they're looking at the camera and smiling. We want some of those shots too from our clients. But getting those genuine smiles is going to be a lot easier if we start and we actually incorporate movement into it. When it comes to dynamic poses, it's that motion that creates what I like to call tension. Not tension in the way that we think of. It's not an anger between each other, but what it does do is it creates that sense of engagement. It brings them along and it brings the viewer along into that moment to see the pull forward, to see that passion that exists in that moment, to get that real, authentic, genuine moment that we've been talking about for the last 5-10 minutes. You can see here that while they're walking towards me, I'm directing them on what to do at first, but once the movement starts, I'm just there. I just capture what's happening. The energy they have during the pose is mimicked in camera, and the moment is really true to life. When we look at dynamic posing, a diagonal line is actually going to create a better view for us because we can start at one location at one point during the time with our clients, and it actually brings us along to the other person or to where we want them to see next. Having diagonal lines in all of your composition is really going to change the game for you. It's going to allow your eye to actually see throughout the photograph. We're going to talk a little bit later about triangles and how they actually change where our eye travels in a photograph. But for now, just recognize that dynamic poses tend to be out. They tend to be wide. They tend to be open. They tend to be emotive. And that's what we're looking for. I like to use what are called stynamic poses. Yeah, you got it. It's a combination between static and dynamic. This is the way that I have found works best for me when I'm actually photographing someone. I'll prompt them to get into a completely dynamic pose, but more often than not, that's not the best angle for them. It's not the best view for their face. It's not going to flatter them in a way that I want it to. So I'll start them off where they're actually in a stopped pose, a static pose, a pose where there's absolutely no movement. And then I'll prompt them forward so that they interact with each other. Whether that be a whisper in an ear, whether that be airplaning, which you're going to see a little bit later. All of those are going to create this stynamic pose, which again flatters my clients, but also gets them interacting with each other. So let's bring it back to the original question. How do I know when to use dynamic poses or static poses or stynamic poses? Well, to quote Sherlock Holmes, it kind of comes down to observation, my dear Watson. You need to go into each and every photo shoot understanding the psychology behind the people who actually walk out of the car. If you have somebody who walks up to you and they are super nervous and super anxious, and you can just tell that their shoulders are closed off and that they are wrapped up in each other, you're gonna need to actually build that trust a little bit more. But there are clients who walk out of the car and they are snuggly already. They're doing those booty taps, they're kissing each other. You know, the senior bounds right out of the car and she is wearing the most beautiful dress and you can tell she just feels stunning. That's not gonna take as much work as the first client. But again, it's about building that trust. So in the next segment, we're actually gonna talk through how to build trust with our clients and how to get into the psychology of being in front of the camera instead of behind.